Talking points for beyond the election that are useful for us all. Somebody go back and fact check, then publicize. In the 1970s, psychologists, their diagnostic and statistical manual, threw out the whole idea of being a normal, well-adjusted citizen. Those three things that make up God and country: straightening out your emotions, willing the good of another person, and doing it because the Pope exists. The same is true with the courts. The courts came out and said we shall have no religion in government, and in doing so, they completely changed the history of our country. It used to be popular to say you can't discriminate on the basis of race, sex, creed, color, or national origin. But the truth of the matter is right now we do exactly the opposite. That's the only thing we do discriminate against, being a normal, well-adjusted society. I use the women's liberation movement so I can see it. There's the women's liberation movement, and they're completely opposite of the Catholic nun. And the professor's opposite of the home economist professor and the common housewife. Then the Air Force WAC here in Tucson is the opposite of these female fighter pilots. Somehow, because of, for some reason, we think that these fighter pilots and feminists and female judges are all courageous. And the truth of the matter is, it's the literal opposite. When they were first getting started in the 1970s, they completely threw out the idea of children. You couldn't even mention it. Then a few years down the road, they decided that they're going to take time off and pass laws that say that they could have children. And right there was the turning point. If they did nothing more than enforce child abuse laws, they would have never gotten away with it. They would have said, okay, you want to be a judge? Take a vow of celibacy and poverty. Be like a Catholic nun. And that other emotion that's in the nun that isn't in the female judge, you adopt that as well. Just to compare the two, just to say the words out loud, you realize that something's horribly and nightmarishly wrong here. And that's enough. There's been the actualization of that. And now there are literally people starving in the streets and living in the streets. Nobody can make the bills, nobody can make ends meet. And there are children living in poverty and mothers living in despair, and guys who can't make enough money to support a wife and children. Those female judges that are in courts right now used to call that kind of guy a male chauvinist pig. Now, we're going to have a political one-sided issue. We're changing the subject now, and it's going to be up to you. You're just going to have to man up, stand right in front of the judge and tell him to go take a hike. One of us committed treason, and it's them. And please don't tell me that I don't care about God and country and government and that sort of thing. My whole life is based around that. And I'm certainly not the only one, and I'm sure you are too. They're the ones who decided they wanted to be in charge for the desire of being in charge, and it's going to be up to you to stand up to them. You can start by pointing things like that out, and then you can admit that this whole election is an absolute joke, and take it from there. Remember, we have to have an act. We have to know what to do. I can tell you what to do. I couldn't do it myself, but I can tell you what to do. It's a 4-stage process. The first stage is to publicize a sense of original sin, because we simply can't, you have to be taught that. And then it's a straightforward 3-step process in the United States. The first step is to go downtown and replace those judges with judges that say only God and country. In a very real sense, you would go to the Supreme Court and insist that from now on it's the Apostles' Creed. Those guys get out of there, and a new group gets in there, and you go back to business. And you do that with the rest of government. In phase 2, you go between Tucson and Tombstone, and you set the ladder straight. They were the consumption society. They became professional consumers, and you just have to reallocate wealth in this direction. You start favoring the common housewife and the guy who produces things. And then phase 3, you build, demand, build. you know what a home economics is, and you simply get started, you Darwinize to heaven. And this is where guys like Donald Trump would be in their glory. I went a little too far, but you always have to. Now, it's up to you. You're going to have to stand there, and you're going to have to face this kind of Darwin violence, and you're just going to have to say, enough is enough.